Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, if you don't mind indulging me, I know that there's been a lot of debate about who's in charge of the border, who's been assigned a task to deal with the border. Some have used the term border czar. Maybe czarina would be more applicable. For clarity's sake, I do want to add, if you don't mind, a AP article from March 24 of 2021. The headline is Biden taps VP Harris to lead response to border challenges. And I'm going to read the very first paragraph. President Joe Biden has tapped Vice President Kamala Harris to lead the White House effort to tackle the migration challenge at the U.S. southern border and work with Central American nations to address root causes of the problem, close quote. And I'd like to submit that for the record. Because I think it is important that we have clarity about not only what has been happening, but what the response has been and the responsibility of that. I'm going to start, frankly, in a slightly different direction, though. I'd like to talk about China and the Chinese nationals. More Chinese nationals have presented themselves at the border this current fiscal year than in the entirety of fiscal year 2023. And I would like to hear Secretary Nichols, is the administration concerned about the intent, not just numbers, but the intent of the Chinese nationals when they arrive? And is there any indication that they are connected to the CCP either overtly or covertly?
Well, I think the arrival of migrants from the PRC is a stunning indictment of the leadership of that nation. The PRC's economic slowdown, government repression, that's what's driving this increase in migrants. And migrants arrive from all regions in China, and the majority of the migrants are middle class and professionally skilled. We continue working with partners to identify countries of concern and coordinate responses to disrupt flows, whether they be from China or any place else.
So you don't believe there's any nefarious intent behind this? This is just people trying to flee a lousy China's economic policy?
I think it's driven by people's deep dissatisfaction with the lives that they have. People don't pick up and leave where they are.
Well, we have slightly different views of the PRC and the CCP and their motives, and we know that this isn't just happening at the southern border. I happen to be the chair of the U.S.-Canada IPG. I live in Michigan. I'm very familiar with the northern border. 2/3 of all of those who have been caught, not the getaways, but who have been caught, who have been on the terrorist watch list, have been actually at the northern border, not at the southern border. There's two borders that have been exploited here. And I'll give you another example. So my wife used to be Canadian, has family in Canada. I'm sure you're familiar with what a Nexus card is, correct? Okay, Nexus card is a unique joint U.S.-Canada permit that allows easier travel for those that sit in front of both a U.S. and Canadian Border Patrol at the same time. It's a very unique thing. So recently, while my wife was getting her Nexus card, I was with her and was talking to one of our Border Patrol agents in Detroit. I said, hey, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions? About 3 questions in, he looked at me and said, what do you do exactly? Because it was fairly specific in my questions. And he was indicating to me that, my question was, is the northern border more vulnerable because of what's been happening at the southern border? And he said, absolutely, sir. He said, we have mandatory 6 months rotations. It's voluntary at first, but if they don't have enough spots to fill, they are moving us off of the northern border down to the southern border. And he happened to be in the El Paso area for 6 months, just recently. He recounted a story about how a family showed up from Brazil. He said they were very well dressed, very nice luggage. And we started asking them and interrogating them, what are you doing? And where do you plan to go? Well, it turns out, according to him, that this family, almost everybody in the family could get a visa, except for the dad. They were trying to go to Disney World. I kid you not. So they all flew to Mexico and decided to come across the border. They did their vacation, and then, according to him, presumably they left because he said they gave us no indication that they actually wanted to stay in the country. This is how porous the border is right now and how ineffective, in my opinion, the enforcement of current law has been, where we have potentially people looking to come to the United States for vacation purposes, not just economic purposes, but we have such a reputation for what's going on. And I cannot fathom, this family from Brazil may not have had nefarious reasons to be here. They wanted to go see Mickey and Minnie. But guess what? The people from China and from a lot of other places may not have that same motive. And what I'm trying to figure out is how this administration can argue that after hundreds of millions of dollars has been spent in Central America to curb migration, we haven't seen that. After all of the other, quote, additional enforcement, we're seeing a clearly more porous border than we ever have. And how do I look at my constituents and my taxpayers and say, this isn't a waste of your money? I mean, that's what we're here today to talk about, right, is the request from state about getting more money to put into these programs, which I would argue have not been effective. So please try to convince me here briefly.
So with regard to Central America and our root causes strategy, I just note over the last 12 months, arrivals from nationals from Guatemala are down 75%, from Honduras down 86%, and from El Salvador down 27%, and they were already at a very low level.
Any of that seasonal?
No, this is...
No, none of it's seasonal?
This is...
Come on.
We're at the lowest levels we've been since... before this administration took office.
We know that there's seasonality to border crossings. We know that.
The other
there were 400,000 legally inadmissible aliens that we know about that that the mass parole program has allowed. 400,000 legally inadmissible aliens have been flown directly into the interior of the United States. I actually have a bill that would require you all to report to members of Congress and to governors when that happens, because we're in the dark. We don't know about that until they land. We've had examples of that in Michigan as well. And by the way, Madam Chair, I'm sure you are very well aware of this. Numerous migrant caravans of thousands of people are still continuing to go. On Monday of this week, the AP reported that another migrant caravan left southern Mexico on foot, heading for the U.S. border. And the article states, quote, some of the members of the group said they hoped to make it to the U.S. border before elections are held in November because they fear that if Donald Trump wins, he will follow through on his promise to close the border, close quote. That's the AP. That does not sound like a border under control to me or an actual working strategy. So that is part of my hesitancy in granting more, hundreds of millions of dollars more to these programs. I'm well over my time, Madam Chair. I appreciate the indulgence and I yield back.